Marcus Chen had seen many impossible things during his 15 years as a xenobiologist aboard the deep space research vessel Prometheus. He had cataloged sentient fungi that communicated through bioluminescent poetry, witnessed gas giant creatures the size of continents, and even made first contact with a civilization of crystalline beings who existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. But nothing had prepared him for what lay dying in the cargo bay of the derelict alien vessel they had just boarded. The ship itself was a marvel of organic engineering, its corridors pulsing with what appeared to be living tissue, walls that breathed in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat. The crew had detected its distress signal 3 days ago, broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't have been possible according to human understanding of physics. Captain Rodriguez had ordered an investigation, despite the protests of the ship's AI, which had calculated a 73% probability that approaching the vessel would result in the total loss of the Prometheus and all hands. Marcus followed the signals, sourced through twisting passages that seemed to reconfigure themselves as they walked, his environmental suit's sensors going haywire as they registered impossible readings. The air outside his suit registered as breathable, but composed of elements that didn't exist on any periodic table. The gravity shifted and flowed like liquid, sometimes pulling him toward what he thought was the floor, other times toward surfaces that had been walls moments before. When they finally reached the cargo bay, Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Before them lay a creature of such impossible beauty and horror that his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. It was enormous, easily 50 meters from snout to tail, with scales that shimmered like fresh snow under starlight. But those perfect white scales were marred by millions of dark, pulsing growths that covered the creature's hide like a living carpet of agony. The barnacles, for that's what they appeared to be, were each the size of a human head, their shells a sickly green-black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They pulsed in unison, and Marcus could see thick ropey tendrils extending from each one, burrowing deep into the creature's flesh. Where they attached, the scales had turned from pristine white to an angry, infected red. The smell that emanated from the creature was indescribable, a mixture of rotting seaweed, burning metal, and something that made Marcus's primal brain scream in terror. But it was the creature's eyes that truly broke his heart. They were massive, intelligent, and filled with a pain so profound that Marcus felt tears streaming down his face inside his helmet. The eyes were a deep cosmic blue, like looking into the heart of a nebula, and in them he saw not just pain but a desperate, maternal love that transcended species barriers. "My God," whispered Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's chief medical officer, as she approached with her scanning equipment. "The neural patterns? Marcus, this creature is more than just sentient. The complexity of its brain activity suggests intelligence levels that dwarf our own." The creature's massive head turned toward them, and Marcus felt a presence touch his mind. It wasn't telepathy in any conventional sense, but something far more profound. Images flooded his consciousness, star systems being born and dying, civilizations rising and falling across eons, and through it all, this creature, nurturing, protecting, guiding. He saw fleets of ships, thousands of different species, all looking to this being with reverence and love. She was a mother, not just to her own kind but to entire civilizations that spanned the galaxy. The images showed her caring for species in their infancy, teaching them to reach for the stars, watching with pride as they took their first steps into the cosmic community. She had guided the evolution of consciousness across 100 worlds, been present at the birth of art, music, literature, and love in forms that human minds could barely comprehend. And now she was dying. The barnacles were not just parasites, Marcus realized as more images flowed through his mind. They were a weapon, created by something ancient and malevolent, something that fed on despair and sought to corrupt the very concept of nurturing love. Each barnacle was alive, sentient in its own twisted way, feeding not just on the dragon's physical form but on her emotional and psychic energy. They were designed to cause maximum suffering, to break down not just the body but the spirit. The worst part was that they were contagious. The images showed other dragons, the dragon mother's children and grandchildren, slowly succumbing to the same infection. Each time she tried to comfort one of her offspring, each time she attempted to use her natural healing abilities, the barnacles spread further. She was trapped in a nightmare where her very love was being used as a weapon against those she cared for most. Marcus felt the creature's desperation as if it were his own. She had tried everything her vast knowledge could suggest. She had sought help from the most advanced medical civilizations in the galaxy, had submitted herself to treatments that would have killed lesser beings, had even attempted to sacrifice herself to prevent further spread of the infection. Nothing had worked. The barnacles were too perfect in their cruelty, too precisely designed to exploit the very qualities that made her who she was. As the mental connection faded, Marcus found himself on his knees, overwhelmed by the sheer scope of the tragedy before him. This wasn't just one creature suffering. This was the potential death of a being who had served as a guardian and guide to countless species across the galaxy. Her death would leave a void that could never be filled, a darkness that would spread across the stars like a plague of despair. But as he looked into those cosmic blue eyes, Marcus saw something else. Hope. Desperate, fragile hope focused entirely on him and his crewmates. She had detected their ship, sensed something in human physiology or psychology that might be different, might be able to help where all others had failed. The weight of that hope settled on Marcus's shoulders like a mantle of responsibility. Humanity was barely a century into their first tentative exploration beyond their own solar system. They were infants compared to the civilizations this dragon mother had nurtured. But sometimes, Marcus thought as he stood and began setting up his scanning equipment, it took the fresh perspective of a child to see solutions that ancient wisdom had missed. Dr. Sarah Kim had performed surgery on 7 different alien species during her tenure aboard the Prometheus, but nothing had prepared her for the complexity of what lay before her. The dragon mother's physiology was unlike anything in human medical databases. Her circulatory system operated on principles that seemed to defy basic physics, pumping not just blood but liquid starlight through vessels that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The barnacles aren't just attached to her skin, Sarah reported to Captain Rodriguez over the comm. They've integrated into her entire biological system. Their root structures extend through her nervous system, her digestive tract, even into what I can only assume are her reproductive organs. It's like they're not just feeding on her, but rewriting her entire genetic code. Marcus watched the readings scroll across his scanner, each number more impossible than the last. The barnacles were producing compounds that shouldn't exist, toxins that operated on quantum levels, breaking down the dragon's cellular structure at the subatomic level. Traditional medicine would be useless against something like this. Even the most advanced alien healing technologies had failed because they operated under the same universal principles that the barnacles seemed to violate. But humans, Marcus realized, had one advantage that no other species in the galaxy possessed. They were magnificent bastards who had spent their entire evolutionary history refusing to accept that anything was impossible. While other species had developed within the orderly confines of logical progression, humanity had clawed its way up from the primordial ooze through pure, bloody-minded stubbornness and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice tight with excitement and terror, "I need you to authorize emergency access to the ship's fabrication systems. All of them, including the experimental quantum assembly units that Central Command told us never to use under any circumstances." There was a long pause over the comm. "Marcus, those systems are classified beyond my clearance level. They're locked down with safeguards that require authorization from Fleet Admiral Chen herself." "Then wake her up," Marcus shot back, "because what we're looking at here isn't just a medical emergency. If this creature dies, we lose the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of galactic civilization. And if these barnacles spread to Earth..." He let the implication hang in the air. While they waited for authorization from Earth, which would take hours due to their current distance from home, Marcus began implementing a plan that would have been considered insane by any rational standard. He had noticed something in the barnacle's structure that reminded him of a particular type of Earth parasite, specifically the Cemathoa exigua, a parasitic isopod that replaced the tongues of fish. The similarity was superficial at best, but it gave him an idea. Humans had been dealing with parasites for millennia, developing increasingly creative methods of removal and treatment. But more importantly, human immune systems had evolved to be incredibly adaptable, capable of learning and remembering new threats in ways that put even the most advanced artificial immune systems to shame. The question was whether human immunity could be adapted to work on an alien scale. Dr. Kim began synthesizing human white blood cells using the ship's medical fabrication systems, genetically modifying them to survive in the Dragon Mother's alien physiology. It was a process that violated about 17 different interspecies medical treaties. But as Marcus had pointed out, those treaties hadn't been written with the current situation in mind. The Dragon Mother watched their efforts with those cosmic blue eyes, and Marcus could feel her gentle presence at the edge of his consciousness, not intruding but simply offering what support she could. Through their connection, he began to understand the true scope of the barnacle infection. Each individual parasite was not just feeding on her physical form, but on her memories, her knowledge, her very sense of self. They were designed to create a feedback loop of suffering, using her pain to generate more pain, her despair to fuel their growth. But humans, Marcus thought with grim satisfaction, had always excelled at breaking cycles that other people claimed were unbreakable. The breakthrough came when engineer Paolo Restrepo, a man who had once rebuilt a fusion reactor using spare parts from a food replicator, suggested treating the barnacles not as a medical problem, but as an engineering one. "These things are feeding on her energy," he said, gesturing at the pulsing parasites. "So what if we give them something else to feed on? Something that tastes better but is really poison?" It was a typically human solution, elegant in its simplicity and absolutely insane in its execution. They began constructing what Paolo called bait cells, artificial organic structures that would appear to the barnacles as an even richer source of energy than the Dragon Mother herself. But these cells were loaded with modified human antibodies, programmed to attack the barnacles' quantum-level feeding mechanisms. The process required materials that didn't technically exist, using fabrication techniques that Central Command had banned for being too dangerous. But the crew of the Prometheus had not become deep space explorers by playing it safe. They jury-rigged impossible solutions, performed calculations that made their AI complain about logical inconsistencies, and created medical devices that operated on principles their own science couldn't fully explain. As they worked, more of the Dragon Mother's story unfolded in Marcus's mind. He saw her children, dozens of them, scattered across the galaxy and slowly succumbing to the same infection. He saw the civilizations she had guided, now desperately trying to help their beloved guardian, failing one after another as their most advanced medical techniques proved useless against the barnacles' twisted perfection. But he also saw why she had hope in humanity. The Dragon Mother had been watching their species since they first reached for the stars, had seen their unique approach to problem-solving. Where other species sought to understand the universe, humans sought to bend it to their will. Where others accepted limitations, humans saw suggestions. Where others found impossibilities, humans found challenges. The Dragon Mother had seen humans turn their own atmosphere into a weapon against invading forces, had watched them survive in environments that should have killed them, through sheer bloody-mindedness and creative applications of violence. She had observed their tendency to solve complex problems with solutions that were equal parts brilliant and insane, their habit of succeeding through methods that made more logical species question the fundamental nature of reality itself. As the first batch of bait cells was loaded into the injection system, Marcus felt a surge of something that was part fear, part excitement, and entirely human. They were about to attempt a medical procedure that had never been tried, using techniques that shouldn't work, on a patient whose physiology they barely understood, to treat a condition that violated the known laws of biology. In other words, it was Tuesday. The first injection went into a cluster of barnacles near what Dr. Kim had identified as analogous to a shoulder blade. If shoulder blades could exist in 17 dimensions and pulse with the heartbeat of dying stars, the bait cells, each one a microscopic miracle of human engineering and stubbornness, dispersed into the Dragon Mother's system like tiny soldiers marching into hell. For a moment, nothing happened. The barnacles continued their rhythmic pulsing, their sickly green-black shells gleaming with malevolent satisfaction as they fed on eons of accumulated wisdom and love. The Dragon Mother's breathing remained labored, each exhale carrying the scent of cosmic despair and dying hope. Then the screaming started. It wasn't audible in any conventional sense, but every human aboard the ship felt it, a psychic shriek of rage and confusion that seemed to come from the barnacles themselves. The parasites had found the bait cells, had eagerly begun feeding on what appeared to be an even richer source of energy than their host, only to discover that they had just consumed something that was actively trying to kill them from the inside. "Readings are off the charts," Dr. Kim reported. her voice tight with excitement and terror. The barnacles are rejecting the bait cells, but the human antibodies are already integrated into their feeding systems. It's like watching cancer try to fight off chemotherapy. If cancer were sentient and really angry about it. The affected barnacles began to convulse, their shells cracking as the modified human immune cells attacked their quantum feeding mechanisms with the sort of relentless aggression that had made humanity the terror of 3 different galactic pest species. The antibodies didn't just fight the parasites. They learned from them, adapted to their defenses, and shared that information with other antibodies through a communication system that Dr. Kim had borrowed from Earth's most successful pack hunters. But the barnacles weren't going down without a fight. As the first wave of parasites began to die, the others seemed to sense the threat and responded with increasing desperation. They began pumping more toxins into the Dragon Mother system, trying to kill their host before the human-designed treatment could reach them. The dragon's vital signs fluctuated wildly as her body became a battlefield between alien parasites and modified human immunity. "She's going into shock," Dr. Kim warned, her hands flying over the medical controls. "Her system can't handle this level of toxin load. We need to slow down the treatment or we'll kill her ourselves." But Marcus was receiving different information through his psychic connection with the Dragon Mother. Despite her pain, despite the toxins flooding her system, he could feel her determination, her absolute refusal to give up. She had endured this agony for decades, watching her children succumb to the same fate, knowing that her death would leave a void in the galaxy that could never be filled. She wasn't about to let a little additional suffering stop her from seizing what might be her only chance at salvation. "No," Marcus said firmly. "She's stronger than we think. She's been holding back, trying to protect us from the full extent of the infection. She's about to stop holding back." As if responding to his words, the Dragon Mother's eyes blazed with renewed fire. Her massive form began to change, scales shifting from wounded white to something that seemed to contain the light of newborn stars. This was power that had guided civilizations across the galaxy, wisdom that had watched the birth and death of entire species, love that had nurtured consciousness itself into existence. And now all of that cosmic force was focused on a single desperate purpose. The barnacles sensed the change and responded with pure panic. They began reproducing at an accelerated rate, trying to spread the infection faster than the human treatment could eliminate them. But they had made a crucial mistake. In their desperation, they had revealed the full extent of their communication network, the quantum entanglement that linked every parasite not just to each other, but to similar infections across the galaxy. Engineer Restrepo, monitoring the quantum readings, suddenly straightened with excitement. "Do you see this? The barnacles are all connected, every single one, across multiple star systems. It's like a galactic nervous system, but one we can hack." The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If they could trace the quantum entanglement back to its source, they could potentially treat not just the Dragon Mother, but every infected creature across the galaxy. But it would require pushing their experimental treatment beyond all safe parameters, using the Dragon Mother's own cosmic awareness as a transmission medium. It was a plan that violated every medical protocol in human space, involved technology that shouldn't exist, and relied on the cooperation of a patient whose physiology they still barely understood. The risk of failure was astronomical, and failure would likely mean the death of not just the Dragon Mother, but potentially everyone aboard the Prometheus. Dr. Kim looked at the readings, ran the calculations, and came to the same conclusion that Marcus had already reached. "This is insane," she said quietly. "The quantum entanglement field we'd need to generate would be visible from 3 star systems away. We'd be announcing to the entire galaxy that humanity has technology that shouldn't be possible." "Good," said Captain Rodriguez over the comm, having listened to the entire exchange. "Let them know. Let every species in the galaxy understand that when humans decide to save someone, we don't mess around." The modified treatment began flowing into the Dragon Mother system in quantities that should have killed any known biological entity. But she wasn't just any biological entity. She was a being who had existed since before Earth's sun had fully formed, who had guided the evolution of consciousness across countless worlds, who had loved and nurtured species that humans couldn't even pronounce the names of. As the human-designed antibodies spread through her system, carried by quantum currents that defied known physics, something beautiful and terrible began to happen. The Dragon Mother's own immune system, dormant for decades under the overwhelming assault of the barnacles, began to wake up. But it didn't just wake up. It learned from the human antibodies, incorporating their adaptability and ruthless efficiency into its own cosmic-scale defensive systems. The barnacles' death screams grew louder, more desperate, as they found themselves facing not just human stubbornness, but the awakened fury of a creature whose love spanned galaxies and whose protective instincts had been honed across millions of years of nurturing younger species. And through it all, Marcus maintained his connection with the Dragon Mother, feeling her pain diminish for the first time in decades, feeling hope kindle in those cosmic blue eyes as she began to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, her long nightmare was finally coming to an end. The transformation was unlike anything in human medical literature, or any medical literature for that matter. As the barnacles died, their quantum entanglement network didn't simply collapse. It inverted, becoming a transmission medium for the Dragon Mother's own awakening immune system. The human antibodies had done more than just kill the parasites. They had taught the dragon's cosmic-scale biology how to fight back. Marcus felt the change through their psychic connection like standing at the edge of a supernova. The Dragon Mother's consciousness, freed from the constant drain of the barnacles, began to expand back to its full scope. He saw through her eyes across light years of space, felt her awareness touch each of her infected children scattered across the galaxy, and for the first time in decades, instead of helplessly watching them suffer, she could actually do something about it. Quantum resonance is increasing exponentially, reported Dr. Kim, her instruments barely able to process the readings. It's like her entire nervous system is becoming a galactic transmission array. Marcus, I think she's about to attempt something that should be physically impossible. Through their connection, Marcus understood what the Dragon Mother intended to do. The human treatment had given her the tools she needed, but now she planned to use her own cosmic awareness as a delivery system, sending the cure across impossible distances to every infected member of her species. It was a feat that would require her to essentially become a living quantum beacon, burning through energy reserves that had been accumulating for millions of years. She's going to try to cure them all at once, Marcus announced to the crew. Every infected dragon across the galaxy. But the energy requirements... He paused, feeling the Dragon Mother's determination through their link. She's willing to sacrifice herself to save her children. Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the comm, steady and determined. Not on our watch. Engine room, I need everything we've got channeled to the medical bay. If she needs energy to transmit this cure, then by God, we're going to help her transmit it. Engineer Restrepo's voice crackled with excitement and terror. Captain, if we channel our entire power grid through the dragon's nervous system, there's a 97% chance it'll overload our fusion cores and create a very pretty explosion that'll be visible from Earth. And what's the 3%? Rodriguez asked. We make galactic medical history and probably break several fundamental laws of physics in the process. I like those odds. What followed was the sort of engineering miracle that humans specialized in, the kind that made other species question whether humanity actually understood science or just bullied the universe into compliance through sheer audacity. The Prometheus's fusion cores were jury-rigged to interface directly with the Dragon Mother's quantum nervous system, using connection methods that Paolo invented on the spot and that would probably give the ship's AI nightmares for decades. As power flowed from the ship into the Dragon Mother, her scales began to glow with an inner light that seemed to contain entire galaxies. The barnacles' death throes reached a crescendo, their psychic screaming echoing across dimensions as they realized that their perfect biological weapon was being turned against them. But there was something else in that scream now, something that made Marcus's blood run cold. Fear. The barnacles weren't just random parasites. They were the creation of something intelligent, something that had specifically designed them to destroy beings like the Dragon Mother, and that something had just realized that its perfect weapon had not only failed, but was being used to trace the infection back to its source. Through the Dragon Mother's expanding awareness, Marcus caught glimpses of the entity responsible for the barnacles. It was ancient, older even than the dragons, and it fed on despair, on the corruption of love and nurturing instincts. It had been systematically targeting beings of cosmic compassion across the galaxy, using their own caring nature as a weapon against them. The dragons had been its greatest triumph, beings whose love spanned star systems, now turned into vectors of suffering. But humanity, it seemed, had not been part of its calculations. The cure began to propagate across the galaxy at speeds that made faster-than-light travel look like a casual stroll. Each infected dragon became a relay point, their awakening immune systems amplifying and retransmitting the human-designed treatment to others of their kind. The quantum entanglement network that had once been a web of suffering was transformed into a galactic healing matrix, carrying hope and restored health to creatures that had been dying in agony for decades. Dr. Kim watched the readings with wonder and growing alarm. The energy output is beyond anything in our theoretical models. She's literally rewriting the quantum structure of spacetime across multiple star systems. But Marcus, her vital signs are becoming erratic. This much energy expenditure, Marcus felt it too through their connection. The Dragon Mother was burning through her life force at an incredible rate, spending energy that had been accumulated over millions of years in a single, desperate gambit to save her children. She was dying, but dying with purpose, dying to ensure that the suffering would end. But humans had not come this far, had not performed miracles of medicine and engineering, just to watch their patient sacrifice herself for the cure. Marcus made a decision that would have terrified him if he'd had time to think about it. Opening his mind completely to the Dragon Mother, he began channeling not just his own life force but drawing on the determination and stubbornness that defined his entire species. It shouldn't have been possible. A human consciousness interfacing directly with a cosmic intelligence should have resulted in immediate brain death, if not complete molecular dissolution. But humans had always specialized in surviving things that should have killed them. And Marcus was about to add one more impossible feat to that list. Through their connection, he felt the Dragon Mother's surprise and then gratitude as human determination flooded her consciousness. She wasn't alone anymore. The entire crew of the Prometheus was with her now, lending their will to hers, their refusal to accept defeat becoming part of her own cosmic resolve. The barnacles' death scream reached a final, universe-shaking crescendo, and then suddenly cut off as the last of the parasites across the galaxy succumbed to the human-designed cure. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus felt something new in the quantum network. Laughter. The joyous cosmic laughter of dragons who were free for the first time in decades, who could once again touch their children without fear of spreading suffering. The Dragon Mother's eyes, those cosmic blue depths that had held such pain for so long, now blazed with pure joy and something else that Marcus was only beginning to recognize. Profound gratitude for a species that had refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. The aftermath of the quantum healing wave rippled across the galaxy like a stone thrown into cosmic waters. Within hours of the cure's transmission, the Prometheus began receiving communications from species that humanity had never even known existed. The messages came in languages that their translation systems couldn't process, using communication methods that ranged from quantum harmonics to what appeared to be organized stellar formations. But the meaning was universal. Gratitude. Captain Rodriguez stood in the communication center, watching display screens fill with alien scripts, mathematical proofs, and what could only be described as interstellar art pieces, all trying to express the same sentiment. "How many species are we talking about here?" she asked Communications Officer Zhang. "At last count, 17,432 distinct civilizations have made contact in the past 6 hours. Zhang replied, his voice filled with awe. "And that's just the ones using communication methods we can detect. The quantum resonance analysis suggests there might be millions more trying to reach us through channels we don't even have sensors for." Through his maintained connection with the Dragon Mother, Marcus was experiencing the restoration firsthand. Each healed dragon was like a star reigniting, their recovered consciousness sending waves of joy and relief across the quantum network. But more than that, he was beginning to understand the true scope of what humanity had just accomplished. The dragons weren't just beloved creatures. They were the foundation of galactic civilization itself. Every major species in the galaxy had been nurtured by dragon mothers at some point in their development. The beings that humanity knew as the Crystalline Collective, the first aliens they'd made contact with, had been taught to think collectively by a dragon mother who spent 3,000 years helping them learn to share consciousness without losing individuality. The gas giant creatures that Captain Rodriguez had studied years ago were actually the children of a dragon mother who had taught them to dance with gravitational fields. Species after species had been guided, protected and loved by dragon mothers during their crucial developmental phases. And for the past several decades, they had watched helplessly as their beloved guardians slowly died from an infection that no amount of gratitude or advanced technology could cure. Until humans showed up and decided that impossible was just a word, Marcus, Dr. Kim said, reviewing the medical scans of the dragon mother. Her recovery rate is beyond anything I've seen. The areas where the barnacles were attached are regenerating at the cellular level. But more than that, it's like her entire genetic structure is optimizing itself. She's not just healing, she's becoming stronger than she was before the infection. The dragon mother's transformation was indeed remarkable. Her scales had returned to their pristine white, but now they carried an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the quantum network connecting her to her children. Her size had increased as well, her body no longer struggling to support parasites that had been draining her energy for decades. But the most significant change was in her eyes. Those cosmic blue depths that now held not just ancient wisdom, but something new. Respect for a species that had earned its place among the stars through pure, bloody-minded determination. The first delegation arrived 3 days later. Representatives from the crystalline collective who manifested as geometric patterns of living light in the Prometheus's main conference room. Their communication came through harmonics that resonated in frequencies that touched human emotions directly. Small builders of impossible things, the translation came through. The collective offers gratitude beyond measure. The first mother who taught us to think as one while remaining many lives because of your gift. How may consciousness itself repay such a debt? Captain Rodriguez, who had led first contact with the collective years ago, found herself at a loss for words. The collective was offering them anything they wanted, and she had the distinct impression that anything included technologies that could reshape civilizations. But it was Engineer Restrepo who provided the answer that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy for generations to come. We don't want payment, he said simply. We just want to be friends. Good friends who help each other out when things get tough. The silence that followed was profound, as if the universe itself was processing this response. Through the quantum network, Marcus felt the dragon mother's amusement and approval. Here was humanity in a nutshell. Offered the treasures of the galaxy, they asked for friendship instead. The response from the collective was a harmony of pure joy that brought tears to every human in the room. The small but mighty builders wish for friendship. This is optimal. This is beyond optimal. This is impossible made possible, which appears to be your species' specialty. Over the following days, the Prometheus became the center of an impromptu galactic celebration. Ships began arriving from across known space, each carrying representatives of species that owed their development to dragon mothers. The diversity was staggering. Beings of pure energy, creatures that existed as living mathematics, species that communicated through controlled gravity waves, and entities that appeared to be sentient ecosystems traveling in self-contained biospheres. They all had one thing in common. They wanted to meet the species that had saved their beloved guardians through sheer refusal to accept that a problem couldn't be solved. The Dragon Mother, now fully healed and stronger than ever, served as both host and translator for many of the encounters. Her children had also begun arriving, dragons of every conceivable color and size, each one eager to meet the small, stubborn creatures that their mother spoke of with such affection. Your species confuses us, one of the younger dragons communicated to Dr. Kim during a particularly surreal medical consultation. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. Your understanding of quantum mechanics is rudimentary at best, and your approach to complex problems appears to involve hitting them with increasingly large amounts of violence and determination until they surrender. Yet you succeeded where species with millions of years of advancement failed. How Dr. Kim considered the question seriously. I think it's because we're too stupid to know when something is impossible, she said finally, and too stubborn to care if we did know. The young dragon's laughter was like the sound of wind chimes made of starlight. Optimal, impossible, stubborn, stupid, clever, it said, apparently trying to create a word for humanity in its own language. Yes, this explains much. As the celebration continued, Marcus remained connected to the Dragon Mother, sharing in her joy as she reconnected with children she hadn't been able to safely touch for decades. But he also sensed something else through their link. The Dragon Mothers were discussing something among themselves, something that involved humanity's future role in the galaxy. "What are they planning?" Marcus asked during one of their mental conversations. The Dragon Mother's response carried the warmth of cosmic affection and the weight of eons of wisdom. "They want to adopt you," she said simply. "All of you. The entire human species. It is unprecedented, but then, so is everything your people do." Marcus felt his knees go weak. Being adopted by the Dragon Mothers wasn't just an honor. It was an invitation to join the galactic community, not as newcomers seeking acceptance, but as beloved children, whose potential was recognized and cherished by the beings who had guided civilization across the stars for millions of years. "But why?" he asked. The Dragon Mother's answer resonated through every level of his consciousness. "Because you saved us when no one else could. Because you chose friendship over payment. Because you embody the qualities we seek to nurture in young species: curiosity, compassion, determination, and the willingness to help others even when it seems impossible. And because," she added with warm amusement, "watching your species grow up is going to be entertaining in ways we cannot even imagine." The celebration was interrupted by something that sent ripples of terror through the quantum network, connecting the Dragon Mothers. Marcus felt it first through his link with the albino Dragon Mother, a presence of such ancient malevolence that his human brain struggled to process it. It was like staring into the heart of a black hole. If black holes could feel hatred and had spent eons perfecting the art of cosmic cruelty. "The devourer of joy wakes," the Dragon Mother communicated, her mental voice tight with concern. "It knows that its weapon has been turned against it, knows that its carefully cultivated harvest of despair has been destroyed. And it comes seeking vengeance." Through the quantum network, Marcus saw images that chilled him to his core. The entity responsible for the barnacles was ancient beyond comprehension, a being that had existed since before the first stars formed. It fed on suffering, specifically on the corruption of love and nurturing instincts. It had spent millions of years creating the perfect biological weapons, parasites designed to turn the galaxy's greatest sources of compassion into vectors of misery. The barnacles had been its masterpiece, a weapon that used the Dragon Mother's own caring nature against them, spreading suffering through the very act of trying to help others. For decades, the devourer had fed on their agony. Growing stronger with each moment of despair it harvested from beings who had spent eons nurturing others. And now humanity had destroyed its greatest triumph, turning its perfect weapon into a cure that had freed every Dragon Mother in the galaxy. "It's coming here," Marcus announced to the assembled crew and alien delegates. "And it's really, really angry." The response was immediate and chaotic. Representatives from 17,000 civilizations began transmitting strategic analyses, offering everything from planet-killing weapons to reality-altering technologies. The Crystalline Collective proposed reorganizing local space-time to make the solar system temporarily inaccessible. The gas giant creatures offered to create a gravitational maze that would trap anything approaching from hyperspace. But it was Captain Rodriguez who cut through the chaos with a question that was purely human in its directness. "How do we kill it?" The silence that followed was profound. Through the quantum network, Marcus felt the shock of species that had spent millions of years developing philosophy, art, and science, but had never considered that the devourer might simply be killable. "Small, stubborn builders," came the response from the collective. "The devourer of joy is older than most stars. It has consumed the despair of countless civilizations. Its very existence is antithetical to life, love, and hope. How does one kill that which feeds on the absence of happiness itself? Same way we killed the barnacles," Engineer Restrepo said with the sort of casual confidence that made alien species question their understanding of basic survival instincts. "We figure out what makes it tick, then we break it." Over the next several hours, the Prometheus became the center of an unprecedented intelligence-gathering operation. Species that had been hiding from the devourer for millennia suddenly found themselves sharing their most closely guarded secrets with a human crew that approached cosmic horrors with the same attitude they might use for a particularly stubborn mechanical problem. The picture that emerged was terrifying in its implications. The devourer wasn't just a predator. It was a cosmic parasite that had been feeding on the galaxy's emotional ecosystem for eons. It didn't just consume despair. It created it, systematically corrupting sources of hope and love to maximize the suffering it could harvest. The Dragon Mothers had been its greatest success, beings whose cosmic-scale compassion had been turned into fonts of galaxy-spanning misery. It's a feedback loop, Dr. Kim realized as she studied the data. The more despair it creates, the stronger it becomes. The stronger it becomes, the more despair it can create. It's been growing for millions of years, and we just gave it the biggest emotional shock of its existence. But Marcus was seeing something else through his connection with the Dragon Mother. Something that the alien analysis had missed. It's not just angry, he said slowly. It's scared. For the first time in millions of years, something unexpected happened. Something it couldn't predict or control. Us. The Dragon Mother confirmed his insight. The Devourer has fed on predictable patterns of despair for eons. But your species, you create hope where none should exist. You find solutions that violate the natural order. You are chaos given form, and chaos is antithetical to its nature. So we're already winning just by existing? Asked Captain Rodriguez. Not winning, the Dragon Mother corrected, but you represent something it has never encountered before. True unpredictability. It cannot feed on your despair because you refuse to despair. It cannot corrupt your hope because your hope is based not on logical expectations but on stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The Devourer's approach was detected by sensors that operated in dimensions humans barely understood. It wasn't traveling through normal space but through the quantum substrate of reality itself, moving through the very foundation of existence like a cancer spreading through healthy tissue. Estimated arrival in 6 hours, reported the navigation officer, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. It's big, really, really big. The gravitational distortions are affecting star systems 3 light-years away. How big exactly? Captain Rodriguez asked. Bigger than Jupiter, possibly bigger than our sun. And it's accelerating. The assembled alien delegates began discussing evacuation plans, strategies for preserving their civilizations if the unthinkable happened. But the human crew was having a different kind of discussion entirely. So, said Engineer Restrepo, we've got 6 hours to figure out how to kill something the size of a star that feeds on despair and has been around since before Earth existed. Anyone have any ideas? Dr. Kim was already running calculations on her tablet. If it feeds on despair and creates feedback loops of suffering, then theoretically, an equivalent positive feedback loop should be toxic to it. Like the antibodies we used on the barnacles, but scaled up to cosmic levels. A hope bomb, Marcus said, the idea crystallizing in his mind as he spoke. We flood it with so much concentrated hope and joy that it chokes on it. The Dragon Mother's laughter rippled through the quantum network like music made of starlight. Hope bomb, impossible weapon made of joy. Yes, this is why the universe needs humans. Other species would never consider weaponizing happiness. As the crew began planning humanity's most audacious project yet, Marcus realized that they were about to attempt something that would either save the galaxy or provide it with the most spectacular failure in recorded history. But that was fine with him. After all, spectacular failures were practically a human specialty, and they had always been excellent stepping stones to even more spectacular successes. The construction of what Engineer Restrepo had dubbed the happiness cannon was the sort of project that would have taken most civilizations decades of careful planning and resource allocation. Humanity and their new galactic family completed it in 4.5 hours using spare parts, impossible mathematics, and what Captain Rodriguez would later describe as weaponized optimism and applied stubbornness. The weapon itself was a masterpiece of collaborative insanity. The crystalline collective provided quantum resonance amplifiers that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The gas giant creatures contributed gravitational focusing lenses carved from crystallized spacetime. A species of living mathematics offered computational frameworks that hurt to look at directly. And the Dragon Mothers provided the most crucial component, access to their cosmic network of love and hope that spanned the entire galaxy. At the center of it all was the albino Dragon Mother, now serving as both targeting system and emotional amplifier for a weapon that shouldn't exist according to any known laws of physics. Through her connection with Marcus, she coordinated with her children across the galaxy, each Dragon Mother adding her voice to what was about to become the largest expression of hope in galactic history. 5 minutes to contact, announced the tactical officer, her voice remarkably steady considering they were about to face down a cosmic entity that had been consuming civilization since before Earth's sun existed. The devourer is, God, it's huge. Sensor readings suggest it's not just large in physical dimensions, but it's creating dimensional fractures just by existing. Reality is literally breaking down around it, through the quantum network. Marcus could feel the approach of something that was fundamentally wrong, an entity that violated the basic principles that allowed joy, love, and hope to exist. It was like staring into a void that stared back with malevolent intelligence, a presence that turned the very concept of happiness into ash. But he could also feel something else building in the network. Defiance. Not just human defiance, though that was certainly there in abundance, but the combined stubbornness of every species that had ever been nurtured by a dragon mother. They had all, in their own ways, learned from their guardians that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the odds. Weapon systems online, reported Dr. Kim, who had somehow become the chief weapons officer for a device that operated on principles of quantum empathy and concentrated goodwill. All galactic civilization networks are connected and resonating. We're showing power levels that don't make sense according to physics as we understand it. Since when has that ever stopped us? Captain Rodriguez asked with a grin that would have terrified sensible species, and apparently did terrify the approaching cosmic horror. The Devourer's arrival was heralded by the screaming of reality itself. Space-time twisted into impossible geometries as something the size of a star forced itself into normal dimensions. It was beautiful in the way that supernovas were beautiful, and terrible in the way that extinction events were terrible. Its form was constantly shifting, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to absorb light, sound, and hope itself. But for the first time in its eons-long existence, the Devourer hesitated. Through its alien senses, it could detect something that had never existed before in its experience, a weapon designed not to destroy, but to create. The energy signatures it was reading from the small human ship made no sense according to the fundamental laws of suffering that governed its existence. It's confused, Marcus reported, feeling the entity's bewilderment through the quantum network. It doesn't understand what we're pointing at it. Its entire existence is based on consuming negative emotions, and we've built something that operates on pure concentrated positivity. Fire when ready, Captain Rodriguez ordered. The happiness cannon discharged with a sound that wasn't heard so much as felt, a harmonic resonance that seemed to originate from the quantum level of reality itself. What emerged wasn't energy in any conventional sense, but something far more dangerous to a creature that fed on despair, concentrated, weaponized hope. The beam struck the Devourer, and the entity's reaction was immediate and violently confused. For millions of years it had consumed despair, fed on suffering, grown strong on the corruption of love and joy. But now it was being force-fed the exact opposite, pure, undiluted hope, backed by the combined determination of thousands of species who had decided that some things were worth believing in, despite all logic and reason. The effect was like watching cosmic indigestion. The Devourer writhed and twisted, its form becoming increasingly unstable as it tried to process emotions it had no mechanism for handling. It attempted to convert the incoming hope into despair, to corrupt it as it had corrupted so many sources of joy before. But human hope was different. Human hope wasn't based on logical expectations or reasonable outcomes. It was based on sheer, bloody-minded refusal to give up, and that made it impossible to corrupt. Increase power, ordered Captain Rodriguez, watching as readings showed the entity beginning to destabilize. If a little hope hurts it, let's see what a lot of hope does. The dragon mothers across the galaxy responded to the call, each one adding their voice to the growing chorus of defiant joy. Marcus felt their combined presence like standing in the center of a cosmic choir, billions of years of accumulated love and wisdom, focused into a single, devastating note of pure optimism. The Devourer's screams shattered the sound barriers of 17 different realities as it experienced something completely foreign to its nature, happiness. Not just simple pleasure or contentment, but the deep, abiding joy that came from love freely given, from hope maintained in the face of impossible odds, from the simple certainty that tomorrow could be better than today, if someone was willing to work for it. As more power flowed into the weapon, fed by the emotional networks of civilizations that the Devourer had spent eons trying to corrupt, something unprecedented began to happen. The entity wasn't just being damaged. It was being changed. The fundamental darkness that formed its core began to crack, letting in light that it had spent millions of years trying to extinguish. "It's working," Dr. Kim reported, amazement clear in her voice. The entity's energy signature is shifting. It's not just being destroyed. It's being converted, transformed. I'm not sure we have words for what's happening. Through his connection with the Dragon Mother, Marcus understood what was occurring. The Devourer hadn't always been a creature of pure malevolence. Eons ago, before the first civilizations had learned to reach for the stars, it had been something else entirely. The concentrated hope flooding its systems was stripping away millions of years of accumulated darkness, revealing what lay beneath. What emerged from the cosmic cocoon of weaponized optimism was something that made every conscious being in the galaxy pause in wonder. The Devourer was gone, but in its place was a creature of impossible beauty, a being of pure light that radiated the sort of joy that comes from finally remembering who you used to be. The creator of dreams. The albino Dragon Mother whispered in Marcus's mind, her mental voice filled with awe. The legend spoke of such a being, one who inspired the first sparks of imagination in young species, who taught them to dream of better worlds. We thought it was myth. The transformed entity pulsed with gratitude and newfound purpose, its presence in the quantum network, no longer a source of terror, but of inspiration. Where it had once consumed hope, it now generated it. Where it had once spread despair, it now sparked the kind of dreams that led to art, music, and the reach for stars. As the immediate crisis passed and the various alien delegations began the complex process of adjusting to a galaxy that suddenly had one more cosmic guardian instead of one fewer, Captain Rodriguez found herself reflecting on what had just occurred. "So," she said to Marcus as they watched the former Devourer begin teaching a young, crystalline collective node how to dream in colors that didn't exist. "We came out here to explore strange new worlds, and ended up weaponizing hope, curing cosmic parasites, and turning a galactic threat into a cosmic kindergarten teacher. Tuesday in space, basically." Marcus nodded, still feeling the warm presence of the Dragon Mothers in his mind, their cosmic laughter mixing with the grateful songs of 17,000 civilizations, and the joyful dreams of a redeemed entity that was already inspiring new forms of art across the galaxy. "Just another day for humanity," he agreed, "though I think we're going to need bigger ships if we keep adopting cosmic horrors." Through their connection, the albino Dragon Mother's amusement rippled like starlight. "Small, impossible, stubborn dreamers," she said, apparently having found humanity's designation in dragon language. "Yes, the universe is going to be very interesting with your species in it." And somewhere in the quantum background of reality, the creator of dreams hummed a lullaby that sparked new hopes in the hearts of beings who had forgotten how to wish for better things. While 17,000 civilizations began composing thank you songs for the small, stubborn species that had taught them all that sometimes. The best way to fight darkness wasn't with weapons but with weaponized joy.